Hello everyone, welcome to today's research seminar brought to you by the Department of English and Communication and the Research Centre for Professional Communication in English. Today's speaker is Professor Kevin Jiang, a distinguished professor in foreign language education at Jilin University in China. His research interests lie in disciplinary writing, academic writing, and corpus studies. He has recently written a single-authored volume, continuing his innovative work in meta-discursive nouns, and also co-authored a volume with his PhD supervisor, Professor Ken Highland. Can everyone, just before I hand over to Professor Jiang, can everyone please ensure that you are on mute? And feel free to drop questions into the chat throughout the talk. So without further ado, a warm welcome to Professor Kevin Jiang.
Okay, thank you so much, Jamie, for the very kind introduction. And I also would like to thank you for this valuable trust on me for this seminar and everything you did to make this happen. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to share one of my recent studies with the colleagues and PolyU and other friends from other universities and places. And this is a project that I have been doing with my collaborator, my close friend, Dr. Christy Chu, who is now working at PolyU. And we came up with this idea back in 2017 when we graduated from Hong Kong U. Back then, Christy attended the 3MT thesis competition at Hong Kong U, and she did observe some interesting things in the way students presented their disciplinary knowledge to a wide audience. And I was then involved in a diachronic study of linguistic features in research articles and Professor Ken Highland. And we draw some conclusions from our corpus data that there is a change in academic context from our corpus finding. And interestingly, I met a guy who was an electronic engineering PhD student. His PhD project was about the design of a kind of cell phone antenna. He told me after publishing his design in research papers, he would go to Shenzhen with his supervisor to talk to some small cell phone firms. If the bosses were interested in their design, the bosses would buy their antenna, their design as a patent. So it really struck me as something was going on, in today's academic world. So I think this idea to look at how students communicate their specialized knowledge to a wide audience is an interesting topic. So Christine and I were determined to look at the linguistic features and discursive features in our project. So this involves the rapid development of technology, communication technology, and the changing ways of knowledge exchange. So this will trigger a growing trend to reach new audiences and participate in different forms of interaction. And this new kind of knowledge communication require a recontextualization of specialized knowledge from its original context of academic publishing in specialized journals to the communication or in a new academic genre to communicate specialized knowledge to a wide audience, to diverse audience, and transforming scientific knowledge into everyday discourse. And it is important here, I think, to establish the usefulness and relevance of research topics to the public interest. And there are recent books exploring the discursive strategies that students and researchers use to communicate their specialized knowledge to a wide audience. And the key here, I think, revealed by these books, that the key is to build proximity with the audience by displaying an orientation and a sensitivity to the knowledge base, processing needs, and rhetorical expectations of non-specialists and even a wider community. And there are a few activities and events going on in the world to cultivate students' capacity to communicate specialized knowledge to a wide audience. And we can see from the table, 3MT thesis competitions cover all the disciplines and have the biggest impact worldwide. So Chris and I decided on this kind of new genre to look at how students use language to communicate their specialized knowledge. So let's look at what 3MT thesis presentation looked like. 3MT competitions were initiated by the University of Queensland in 2008. Students are challenged to explain their research findings within 3 minutes to non-specialist audience with only one static PPT slide. And the participants are normally or mostly research postgraduate students. Although we use this kind of new genre to train students' skills in oral presentations, a more additional educational value by this event is the way how we train students to communicate disciplinary knowledge to the wider audience. And we can see this educational focus of 3MT presentation from the website of holding universities. Like it emphasized that 3MT presentations is an exercise to train students how to encourage students to consolidate the ideas and crystallize their research discoveries to engage a non-specialist audience. And presentations are judged by a wide audience or a wider community according to the rubric given by the organization. There's a kind of a snapshot of the judging criteria. So the presentations are judged not only by the content of the presentation, but also the way students engage and communicate, engage audience, the way students engage audience and communicate their research to the wider audience. So the evaluation is mainly concerned with a clear and logical spoken narrative of science that students need to capture and maintain the audience attention. And we can also see from other studies on this new academic genre, 3MT presentations feature a discursive hybridity in its nature. 3MT presentations are like other spoken academic genres like seminars and conference presentations. Presenters have to attend to listeners' processing needs in a real-time speech event and build up personal rapport and solidarity. But they are not like other academic genres like seminars and conference presentations, because in this new academic genre, presenters have to use different rhetorical strategies, discursive strategies to offer a clear and effective delivery of scientific concept to general audience, because the audience have different disciplinary backgrounds, have different knowledge backgrounds. And this is much like other infotainment presentations like TED Talks. And 3MT presentations are also competitive because it's a competition. So students have to prepare and rehearse a lot for the peak performance to impress judges. So 3MT presentations are essentially seen as an academic genre. By this academic genre, we can understand how students use different linguistic features and discursive strategies to well communicate their disciplinary knowledge, and also as a way to popularize this scientific knowledge to a wide audience. And this also points to the importance of persuasive interaction. Students need to build up with the audience, and so they use different discursive strategies to build immediacy and share the goals and social rapport with the audience. So that's why Chris and I decided to look at how students use different strategies to build social interaction, interpersonal relationship with the audience. So we decided to use Professor Helen's model, stance and engagement, because this model not only emphasizes the way presenters express themselves, how they judge, how they express their judgment on the topic, on the audience, and on the discipline, but also the way how to engage, talk to the audience as well in the meantime. So we decided on this model. Let's look at this model, stance and engagement. So academic interaction is widely acknowledged. We're so familiar with academic interaction from a provision of prior studies. These studies have shown us that academic interaction is persuasive. So academics do not simply report neutral facts, but they take a novel point of view towards what is discussed while anticipating audience imagined reaction to those views. And this interaction has been likened to hand clapping. So writers or speakers and listeners, like two hands, they can make sense by anticipate each other's response. So to increase the accessibility of their findings, researchers work to create interaction in discourse, which involves not only their self-presentation and positioning in relation to the issues they discuss, but also to show their alignment with the audience. And Professor Highland summarized these two aspects of social interaction as stance and engagement. So in his model, stance is more like a writer-oriented dimension of social interaction, which includes hedges and boosters. These are judgments on certainty of knowledge, and also include attitude markers, which expresses personal feelings, good or bad. Hedges and boosters like certainty, like may, could, perhaps, as typical hedges, should, obviously, like boosters, and self-mentions, explicit presence, explicit stepping into text by the writers, like I, we, our, these kind of markers. And engagement is more like a reader-oriented alignment, which comprises reader mentions like you, your, and directives, consider, note these imperatives, rhetorical questions, knowledge appeals like of course, these kind of markers to summon readers' background knowledge and personal sides. And there are so many studies using this model, and these studies have shown us that the choice of these rhetorical resources is socially situated in a disciplinary or institutional context. So this use of interaction markers is not a personal take. It taps into writers understand how the community, how audience accept knowledge. So it represents one's judgment about a particular discourse community regarding what counts as knowledge. So this model not only is applicable to writing research, it can also be used to study spoken discourse. And Jiang has looked at stance engagement in academic speeches. Guest look at stance engagement in conference presentations. This study has shown us that academic speech activities strongly involve speakers negotiating a balance between authority and solidarity with the audience. And spoken interaction features much more direct context and elicit an immediate response. So this academic spoken discourse have more spoken and engagement features than research writing. So the fact that 3MT presentations not only involve on the stage academic speech, but also rely on a discursive reconstruction of scientific knowledge for a wide audience. And this fact may impact on a range of features, linguistic features, not least how presenters express a stance and engage listeners. So Chris and I decided on these two dimensions of social interaction, and we set up our research questions as follows. What are the frequency, forms, and functions of stance and engagement features used in 3MT presentations? And how do the particular rhetorical context, genre, register, and disciplinary propositional content shape the presenter's use of these rhetorical resources? So we try to look at the quantitative information about these stance and engagement features used in 3MT presentations, and we try to explain why presenters from different disciplines use different frequencies use different frequencies of stance and engagement markers, and how we explain this use of rhetorical features. And this use of features may be different from research writing, from written discourse. So we try to explain the use of stance and engagement markers in terms of genre, the particular genre, the academic 3MT presentations, which is different from other academic genres like conference presentations and seminars, a register which is spoken and different from written genre, written registers from research writings, and the disciplinary variations, because students have to show the connection between their disciplinary knowledge and social concerns. So we try to explain by including this wide range of factors. To answer these questions, Christy and I built a 3MT corpus by collecting 80 presentations given by the finalists of the competitions at Hong Kong U during the years of 2012 and 2019. The presentations cover a wide range of disciplines, from hard sciences to soft sciences, including science, engineering, medicine, arts, education, and social sciences. And back to the model of stance and engagement. This model, Professor Hannon proposed this model by his corpus findings from research writings. So the model was originally based on written genres, written discourse. So some markers may not be applicable to spoken discourse. So we have to make a modification to this genre, to this model. So first we piloted the interactional markers, stance and engagement markers with the Bayes and my case corpora. I think you have already known these two spoken corpora, British academic spoken English corpus and the Michigan corpus of academic spoken English corpus. And we also included another 40 features like adjectives spoken from spoken discourse, stance markers, like others had found in teletalks. These are spoken stance markers, some good or bad, these kind of simple spoken markers. So we also included these markers. And we also renamed reader mention in the engagement categories, like listener mention, because reader is not applicable, it's not workable in spoken discourse. So this modified model of spoken stance and engagement comprised about 500 potential markers. And we examined these markers by using anacon and manually checked each concordance line to ensure that each line, the markers in each line were performing as stance and engagement expressions. And we also normalized the results to 1,000 words to compare across corpora, which is very conventional in corpus-based analysis. And we determine statistical significance by using log latitude test and effect size as well. So let's see what we found from our corpus. Let's look at stance expression first, and then we move on to engagement markers. We identified 1,882 stance markers, about 50 cases per 1,000 words, and 21 cases per presentation. This frequency is much higher than what was found in research writing, which is about 30 cases per 1,000 words reported by Professor Kevin Jiang in his original work. We think this difference has much to do with the spoken register, because speech settings features an interactive interaction, a very online interaction. So speakers address an immediate audience. So this online character shows a higher involvement and a less faceless stance making practice. That's why we have found a much higher frequency of stance markers in 3MT presentations than research writing. And a detailed look at the data shows that an explicit self-mention the first row in this table, self-mentioned, accounts for almost half of the stance expressions, typically by means of first-person pronouns. First-person pronouns are quite common, like we have seen in Biber's work, in other people's corpus work. First-person pronouns are very common in spoken registers, but we think it play a more important role in 3MT presentations, because in 3MT presentations, the projection of self can help to make students present themselves as real, approachable people with concerns that many in audience can identify with. So this creates a personal dialogue, as we can see from these two examples. Like I addressed in my PhD study, I think of and I found, and in the engineering presentation, I applied this controller. I also coordinate the controller, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we can also see from these two examples that to frequently mention themselves is also a way to foreground their personal role in the scientific exploration and claim credit for knowledge contribution by these presenters. We can also note from table 2 here that attitude markers are used more frequently than hedging and boosting devices. Attitude markers are a very direct and blunt way to express personal feelings, and they are typically disfavored in research writing, where hedges and boosters are more commonly used. But these emotional appeals are more frequent in 3MT presentations, and we think this is because these emotional appeals can help to create strong interpersonal ties and transform knowledge dissemination into an entertaining event that makes science accessible and acceptable to general audiences. And we can also see the use of these self-mentions, these first-person pronouns, in line with the spirit of scientific popularization, which was found by Bondi and Gotti, these scholars. The scientific popularization emphasizes the uniqueness and originality of research findings. So these attitude markers can help presenters. These attitude markers can help presenters to emphasize the uniqueness and originality of the findings, and also arouse the curiosity of the audience. As we can see from these two examples, dramatically, these cells are amazing. It's very emotional to this wide audience. And besides the above likely influence of the register and genre features of 3MT presentations, we think it's also interesting to see the disciplinary variation in the stance making practice. As we can see in table 3, presenters in the hard domains make more use of stance markers than the peers in the soft knowledge fields. At the bottom row, 54 cases per 10,000 words versus I consider like 46 maybe every 1,000 words in the social sciences. So presenters in hard sciences use more stance markers than their peers in soft disciplines. And the more frequent expression of stance in the 3MT presentations in hard sciences, we think largely aligns with what Professor Highland and I found in our diachronic studies of stance features in research writing. We showed that, Professor Highland and I showed that scientists now display more authorial intrusion and a more visible stance than in the past. We attributed this trend to the need to address audience beyond an immediate group of informed insiders to promote both one's research and oneself. So hard sciences are typically concerned with abstract concepts and seek to establish empirical truths which defines relationship between observed phenomena and relies on inferred structures and processes that are not directly accessible to public experience. But as we can see from these two examples, a clear personal stance can help to present the abstract scientific subjects in a more colloquial manner and assist a diverse audience to make a better sense of the presented scientific knowledge. Like I found incredibility might better in the second example. So it's more easily to be can be easily understood by this wide audience, because this audience do not have much technical knowledge to understand this specialized information. So the use of stats markers can help this audience to understand what they have found in their research. And in addition, engineering and medicine presenters, as we can see in table 3, use more additive markers than those from other disciplines. And the majority of the additive markers they use are what are called importance markers and surprise markers, which emphasize the importance and surprise against the reader's prior knowledge, respectively. As we can see from these two examples, these knowledge emotions recently, Professor Hu at PolyU and his PhD students, Wang Qian, published a paper on Lingua to show their new research on knowledge emotions. So they call these markers knowledge emotions. So these knowledge emotions should have the persuasive effect of intriguing the non-specialist audience with the news value of a research project and show the tangible bearing it has on the social lives, on public interest. So we can see from these examples, even more important is that this data generated blah, blah, blah. And in the second example, the most surprising information is that blah, blah, blah. So the presenters here seek to foreground what is found important and novel in their projects when communicating scientific knowledge to the wide audience. And this table also shows us that medicine stands out in using these rhetorical stance features, especially the use of self-mentioned. Medicine stands out. And this stance option, self-mention, I, we, this self-mention, and this stance option includes the use of first personal pronouns like I mentioned, I, we, us, and possessive adjectives like our, these kind of forms, indicating how academics stand in relation to their argument, discipline, and audience. And a further scrutiny of the linguistic form shows that these exclusive plural forms of first-person pronouns, we, our, and us, are used far more often in medicine. In medicine, presenters use these plural forms of first-person pronouns, we, our, more frequently than their peers from other disciplines. And we think this has something to do with medical research, because we think this more frequent use of plural forms has something to do with the teamwork, teamwork-based collaboration work in medical research. Medical research typically entails a long-term investment of human, monetary, and experimental resources, as Bozeman and Boderman report. Team collaboration and professional interaction in medical sciences are the golden guarantee of research objective, even a pilot and a doctoral studies. So we find it's So this may help us to explain why medical presenters use more plural form of self-mention in their presentations. Now let's move on to, here are some examples like in medical presentations. Here is our experiments, like in the second example, in animal level, in animal level, we find, so ours are very common in medical presentations. This may be caused by their research ethos in medicine, like team-based collaborative work, long-term investment of human and experimental things. Let's move on to listener engagement we found in the 3MT presentations. We identified 1,207 engagement markers in the 3MT presentations, about 36 cases every 1,000 words, and 15 cases every presentation. And this is much lower than the frequency we have mentioned in the use of stance markers in the 3MT presentations. We think this difference suggests that the less assured composition of audience may reduce the presenter's confidence in frequently engaging listeners explicitly. So because the audience are diverse, so presenters may not be that confident, may not be that certain to overtly engage audience into their presentations as peer discourse participants, but they are more likely to present themselves onto the discourse to show their personal take, to show their judgment on what they are discussing in their presentations. And we can see in this table, table 4, the overall frequency of engagement markers in the 3MT corpus. We can see here, listener mention, like you, your, listener mention, by second person pronouns, and inclusive we, like our here indicates the collective use of we, referring to both presenters and the audience in the presentation. So these listener mentions are most frequently used in the 3MT presentations. As we can see, this table accounting for over 60% of all the engagement strategies. And we think second person pronouns, like first person pronouns are very common in personal interaction, in spoken interaction, as we can see from corpus findings by Professor Biber and other people, corpus work. But we also think second person pronouns, listener mentions play a more important role in 3MT presentations, because 3MT presentations, their listeners are more outside a disciplinary framework of assured knowledge. So forms such as inclusive we invoke a sense of shared understanding and rapport between presenters and the audience, building up a cooperative ethos, while second person pronouns relate to listeners as someone much like the presenters who are able to perceive the usefulness of research outputs, and this can also help to create emotional proximity. As we can see from these two examples, like we in the first example, to include listener into the discourse, into the presentations as a collective or peer followers. Let's look at the research together. So we'll gain listeners' acceptance to the largest degree. And in the second example, like your bending, so we really refer to the listener themselves. So we'll try to stimulate listeners' sympathy with what is talking about in the presentation. And other patterns of second person pronouns we found in the corpus includes like establishing a common ground with the audience, like have you ever experienced, appealing to their data experience, like how do you look at faces, addressing them as addressing them as an everyman researcher, and recommending actions to take, like, and the next time when you go to a seafood restaurant, just be cautious, whatever. So these are the other patterns in which students use second person pronouns to engage listeners into their discourse, try to gain the listeners' acceptance on what they're talking about in their presentations. We can also see here in this table that knowledge appeals are least commonly used. This may point back to the nature of 3MT presentations and the audience composition in the presentations, because audience have very different diverse knowledge and disciplinary knowledge base. So readers may not be that safe to summon knowledge from the audience because presenters are not sure about the knowledge base of the listeners of the audience. Let's look at the disciplinary variation in the use of engagement markers in the corpus. Here in table 5, we can see here that we can see here in the table 5 some disciplinary variations. Overall, there's no significant difference between these two major caps of disciplines, like hard and soft discipline, different knowledge fields. There's no significant difference between these two major territories of knowledge fields. But when we look at into specific category of engagement markers, we did find some interesting difference between these two disciplinary types. Like the second row question, we can see here presenters in humanities and social sciences make more often use of questions in their presentations. But presenters in hard sciences, they use directives more often than their peers in social sciences. So let's look at directives and questions respectively. So we look at directives first. Directives are typically used to instruct the audience to perform an action or follow the presenter's views to see things, including imperatives like remember, note, imagine, imperative. Like the first example, imagine you were looking at two galaxies through a telescope. And it also includes model obligations like must, should, ought, such as the example 16, we should develop a more appropriate strategy. And first person inclusive let imperatives, let's consider, let's note, whatever. So let's, and predicative adjectives impressing the importance of something, like it is important to do something. So these 4 types of directives can be used in the presentations. But when we look at the concordance lines, we found that presenters in hard sciences, they prefer to use imperatives, but students from social sciences, they are more likely to use, which one? They're more likely to use model obligations more often than their peers in hard sciences. And when we look at further into different acts driven by directives different acts proposed by directives, and also interesting findings emerged from our corpus data. And if we look at different acts, different acts proposed by directives, because directives can be used to engage audience into 3 kinds of activities: tactual acts, which guide them through the discussion; cognitive, let's refer to this kind of tactual act. Let's refer to someone's research. This is a tactual act. And cognitive acts like consider, believe, think, which steer them through a line of reasoning. And physical acts which instruct listeners to carry out research processes or perform some actions in the real world, like carry out, experiment, develop, this kind of physical acts. And interestingly, we found that physical acts are much more frequently used by presenters in social sciences. We think physical acts seem an essential component of social science research, because social science research, in their presentations, this research try to appeal to either government authorities or the general public to take actions in real world, in real terms, or in response to economic, educational, and political problems in social realities, like we can see from these 2 examples, we should develop. And it is very important to turn otherwise useless rules, blah, blah, blah. So these physical acts can appeal to governments or public to take some actions in the real world. So we'll try to help listeners sympathize with what need to do in the real world to solve these sort of problems. So that's why physical acts are more frequently used by presenters in social sciences. Let's move on to questions. As we can see from this table, table 5, questions are more frequently used by presenters from social sciences, from arts and social sciences. Questions are the strategy of dialogic involvement, directly inviting the audience to enter the frame of discourse where they can be led to the speaker's viewpoint. And as we can see from these examples, questions can help writers to these examples. As we can see from these examples, questions can invite collusion with audience, especially on controversial topics. And we can see this higher frequency related to the more complex and blurred nature of soft knowledge in social sciences. It typically encompasses more diverse perspectives and interpretations than that in the hard domains, comprising a more direct debate and bearing on people's daily life. So presenters in social sciences use such a rhetorical query to lead audience to their point of view and seek for experiential sympathy with what it's talking about in the presentations. So let's wrap it up. From this presentation, we can see in our research project, 3MT presentations are a useful platform to train research students' capacity to popularize disciplinary knowledge. Unlike research writing, 3MT presentations address an immediate audience, and this conversational feature justifies a highly frequent use of first and second person pronouns in the presentations. 3MT presentations also differ from other spoken academic genres like seminars and conference presentations because 3MT presentations are directed to a disciplinarily heterogeneous audience, disciplinarily heterogeneous audience, which compromises the presenter's certainty about how much they could directly engage listeners through the discourse. So presenters are found to use stance expressions more often than engagement devices, as we have discussed above. So this shows an attempt to summon the audience background knowledge to least extent, because presenters are least sure about what knowledge they could summon from the diverse audience. Furthermore, we have observed the connection between the use of interactional resources and disciplinary propositional content. As we have mentioned above, hard sciences make more use of stance expressions, especially attitude markers, which highlight the importance and surprise value of research findings, because research subjects in sciences are typically abstract beyond a common sense of nature, and this increased persuasive interaction can help to communicate such a specialized knowledge, scientific knowledge, to a wide audience. And on the other hand, we have also seen that presenters in presenters in soft sciences used questions to help arouse sympathy from the audience. So help these presenters in social sciences to build up dialogical involvement with their audience using these rhetorical questions. So by the way students use these stance and engagement markers, we can see how students understand the connection between their discipline and social values and social concerns. And they can also help us to understand how students reflect on the bond between their disciplinary knowledge and the likely stakeholders that their disciplinary knowledge may relate to. So in today's world, students have to understand how to use these rhetorical interactional features to manipulate this communication of specialized knowledge to a wide audience. Because in today's academic world, as we have mentioned above at the beginning, postgraduate students, research postgraduate students have to grapple with the challenges of communicating disciplinary knowledge to disciplinary knowledge in a diversity of ways with a diversity of people as they develop their academic literacies. So we think it is a need to include popularizing activities such as 3MT presentation into the genre constellation of postgraduate students education program in order to equip young researchers with the skill set and rhetorical toolbox that they may need to cope with various genres and audiences in their future professional careers. So that's a part of the research research findings from our research project on 3MT presentations. We also look at, Christy and I also looked at how students rhetorically organized their presentations to better reshuffle, recontextualize their disciplinary knowledge to the need of the wider audience. So we use move analysis to look at how students rhetorically organize their presentations. And we published the findings in the paper we published on discourse studies. We have been thinking of other dimensions to look at 3MT presentations. Like we have another paper under review. We look at rhetorical hypes. Recently, Professor Hyde and I looked at how scientists, medical scientists hype their COVID research. And we also, Chris and I also look at how students use hyping markers. Hyping basically includes boosting and attitudinal markers. We look at how students use these kind of hyping markers to market their disciplinary knowledge to the wider audience. And we compared 3MT presentations with different related academic genres. And we are also planning to look at other dimension features. We hope to share more research from our project. And this is what I want to share with all of you here by this presentation. Thank you so much.